Hello, everyone. My name is Ann Pierce. I am the director of the Creative Arts Program at Soka University of America. Welcome. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to my friend, my colleague, to our artist in residence, Arie Galles. Arie has been making artwork for decades. His creative process, dedication, and thoughtfulness as it pertains to color, geometry, symbolism, numerology, are all informative to this recent series of works he will present to you this evening. It is my pleasure to introduce Arie, closing in on nearly 80 years of making work, and he's full of life and verve and power, and has my total admiration and respect. Please join me in welcoming Arie Galles.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, it's been a long time around this planet. Thank you. Thank all the whole crew that's involved there, Susan, Claire, and everybody else in IT. This has been a major effort on all of Soka University to get this program on right now. And I'd like to welcome you to this lecture, and Khai FLow. And I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to have my colleagues to be around, and I see a lot of friends that I can see on the screen here that are watching right now. So let me go and start the lecture. We have it. Okay. So now this lecture, this work started after New Year's, where I've had for a while, it was even difficult for me to drive and to draw and so forth. And of course, I realized that I had cataracts. And after, the first one, the last one, etc., my eyes opened up. I saw the world a little bit differently. And here, now we're having a problem that doesn't want to move. Okay, which one? This one?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, this arrow here? Okay. Thank you. It's technology works very well that way. What I wrote, is Khai means life in Gematria, which is the numerological value of the Hebrew letters Het and Yud that form the word Khai, which adds up to number 18. It means life, and 18 is one of the secret little omens or whatever you want to call it when you say to somebody, you drink to l'chaim, you drink to life. These drawings were conceived to contain the same number of images as 18. That means as micro flash perception of my cataract-free new eyes. Upon opening my eyelids, once the bandages were removed, they were radiating, fluctuating rainbows of color that overwhelmed my vision. These flowing visual sensations spur me to continue my artistic endeavor with dedicated focus and a new hope. The new hope being that I actually can see. I thought about it a lot. What would happen, say, 100 years ago, when an artist starts losing their sight, when the cataracts are blocking their eyes? There was nothing to do about it. And lucky to be here and lucky to have the medical people to come in and being able for me to look through new eyes. I'll give you first a little bit of a background for those of you who have never seen it about some of the works I've done before. And the Heartland one is oil pastels. Now, those are drawings I did of landscapes, and you can see that I used the grid. And the part about using oil pastels is that I use them anyway, on very heavy paper. It has a grain on it. So I can actually build up layers upon that comes in. You build up a richness of color because of the granulated texture of the paper. And as you can see here, like for instance, this is based upon some view from the air about some kind of, in the middle of a desert. I noticed there's someplace in Arizona, perhaps, those fields. And you notice the little cross hatchings and so on that are working on, that brings up the subtlety of the color. And even though the background itself appears to be one, it is not. It's made of many different things. So those are some earlier works the same way. You can see how the oil pastels build up the different layers and how I'm fascinated, even though this is sort of an oblique view at that time, my early works, of what's happening. And this is called interstate, for instance, and people ask me, how come I made the roads red? And it was a simple answer, the red on the maps, the major roads and so on. That was it. And so I love the fact that basically Da Vinci would have probably, as I said before, maybe given his left lung to be able to fly at 38,000 feet and look at the beauty of the landscape. Those in the Heartland series, you can see all of that. Those are quite large works, actually. Heartland 2 is when I came to SOCA. In 2004, I was hired by SOCA to be the art director, and I started doing works a little bit different. So I started being fascinated by oxbows and river floods and so forth, how the landscape is changed, even though humanity makes everything rigid and angular, nature itself breaks those kind of angularities. And you can see here how every area can be built up by many layers. So this is with the eyes that I'm seeing here and that I'm drawing, is everything was built up by layers. So it gives you this almost pointillistic point of view without my having to make points because the paper itself is doing it. This is actually one of my favorite drawings, is inspired by a night flight to Los Angeles from the East Coast. And somehow there were some kind of river winding below and there was a full moon. And as the plane moved, there was almost like a line of light and the river started shining silvery in the middle of the night. That's all I could see at that point. This is here from Australia. I was noticing those things here. And this is a diptych, quite large pieces, which I did it's basically complementary colors. The red becomes the green becomes the red, blue becomes orange, and so forth. This was sort of inspired from my imagination of how a landscape would look, a forested landscape, how it would look would there be a flood. So you notice the line of the river through the middle sort of making upside down S. And this is another one with another area with the moon shining through this. And the third, how it would look with a fall flood, And this is how the whole triptych looks like. I'm very happy. It's one of the few times where my friend, the collector, came in and looked at the works and bought them instantly, which is one of the most joyous thing an artist can have, if somebody actually buys the work, besides the part that took for you to actually do that. I returned in 2014 after probably 58 years to Poland, where I grew up, and I did a whole series called Powrót. This is a multimedia works. And you notice this is what's representing Poland just right after the war. And slowly it starts receding. And now it creates, the Polish flag is the white on top and red. And this is also that the land was filled with blood, but new life came out from there. And this is a memory from my childhood, running into the fields of wheat with cornflowers and poppies. It was just such a wonderful thing for me to regain that. And this, when I went a few years later to the region of Eastern Poland where my mother and father are from, and I just drew the aerial views of that. This is actually an oil pencil. And again, it's on a rough paper, so I can build different layers based upon my observation and based upon Google and changing things or removing things I didn't like or adding things I thought should be there. And this is what the whole series looks like. Now, this series, Chromatic Modulation, Book of Circles, oil pastels on watercolor paper, that shows you what can be done with the same areas, the same rectangles, the same diagonals, etc., but with oil pastels, which means I have each one of those things about 8, maybe more layers of paint, of acrylic, pastels, I mean oil pastels that are coming in on it. And I could create this kind of a brilliant feeling about it, not the kind of dullness I had before. So you can see that by putting something on top of another color, but not pressing hard enough, whatever was underneath still pops through the other colors, and it gives a kind of vitality to this. And it's basically based on color. And it's also based on circles and grids. Now, here we're talking about the flow of life. Because life goes on every day, you have surprises. Every day you plan something. Every day you get inspired by something else. And all of a sudden, I came back from my first surgery. You know, it was amazing because they didn't put enough uh, for me to fall asleep completely. So in the middle of the eye surgery, I woke up with somebody poking my eye and I seeing lights in there scraping inside my eye. And I started talking to the doctor. And I think they didn't like that part. They just gave me another shot and I fell asleep again. I don't remember what else happened. But all of a sudden, when those of you who've had cataracts, who had them removed, it's an amazing fact. When you open up your eyes, the whole color theme that you thought you saw the rest of your life changes because you've gotten used to something. I realized that the walls in my house are white. I knew they were white, but I didn't see them as white. So I started working on this paper. I found uh, a bunch of pencils, which I probably haven't used in about 30 years or more. Those are wax pencil. And and for some reason, I decided to do it on a very smooth Bristol paper. So I was trying to do again what I saw when they were scraping inside my eyes and so forth, and what I saw when bandages were taken off later, and I started incorporating it as a new vision, but still using the same thing. And I made a few rules for myself. I use a 1/4 inch drafting tape, and there's going to be rectangles or squares, and there's going to be circles in the middle, and then trying to see, circles, of course, those are the eyes, and trying to see what this new paper and the new pencil does. And what happened is, especially if you look at the upper left corner of the image, it was kind of muddy. It wasn't the kind of brilliance that I expected, although the pencils themselves are incredibly brilliant. And I worked at it and tried to figure out the medium. And what happened, this paper is smooth, so I couldn't build up layers. And there was a lot of white of the paper shining through. And I started saying to myself, maybe I should try to see if I can start making textures myself, even before knowing what I really wanted as far as the color. But I did want to see something new. And I started doing, and as you notice, I always start working from the upper left to the lower right. And if you look at the images here in the development of it, you notice that by the time I got to that sort of a purple blue circle with a wedge in it, already I started having the feeling that I started to discover that in order to draw the way I like to see the interaction of color, I had to make texture almost like a Byzantine mosaic or stainless glass, that I had to work with that. And it was kind of exciting because you stand for hours over your drawing table and you work out, and there's a kind of serendipity of which choices of colors and shape that you're going to do. So in the beginning of every suite, I go and I return to something which is comfortable for me, which is something that I am used to doing, but all of a sudden I have a different outlook on it. So this is the first one that I said myself, wait a minute, this is what I saw during my surgery. It's this light shining in your eye, and I have, that I guess they're inside your eye and they're poking and scraping away your lenses, and sort of darkness and this brilliant light. And the way I could achieve this brilliance is to use reds and oranges and the complements of blues and greens to create this kind of a glowing orb that became the focus of my, before I started talking to the doctor as he was scraping my eye. And slowly I started evolving. What is the calmness of it? What is the I usually work in complement. So when I have something that's extremely red or vibrant that way, I'll shift to something that's blue and green and just see how the shapes modulate. And I experiment, as you can see, on different ways. And with those pencils, which is quite amazing, when you draw the basic wiggles or whatever you want to call them or shapes in one color, and then you put the other color of another pencil on top, uh, they don't really, it's almost like slides over the previous color and only attacks the color, the empty paper that was there before. And I am starting to get more of this crystalline view. So I've been changing. See, I always like diagonals. It gives some kind of an energy to the work. And also, even though this looks kind of haphazard, you notice that I've been experimenting with everything from gesture of strokes to coloration, color compositions, and so on. Going back to what I showed you before, almost like thinking of an arid desert with green irrigated fields in between, or some places only partially irrigated. So all of this is a sitting someplace. When you work, you almost are involved in it to the point, I guess, the Zen or something. You almost are observing your own hands doing the work and your eyes selecting the next pencil. How does it happen? Uh, whether it's mistake or not. Sometimes you can work very hard and not accomplish anything. Sometimes everything just keeps to flow. And this is the first one based upon what I saw after the bandages were taken off, not what was inside my eye. But what happened is that every time I would look at the source of light, there was this radiating things almost pulsating, which I can't show you in this steady form of the things bouncing back and forth, color shifting and so on. And there was a really new concept, which I have not dealt with before, to have this kind of a brilliant thing that's happening. And next one, I tried to multiply it because the things in my eyes kept changing all the time. It wasn't like one color and the other, but I also kept this one was an exercise for me to make the grid, the taped out area, which is white that you see, to make that very positively vertical and horizontal, but at the same time create bands of diagonal colors that are going across it, because it almost like reminded me, almost like looking at the fluctuating TV screen in the old days where you had rabbit ears, and you had to stand there and wobble the ears to get the image in it, and the scan, you could actually see the visible scan of it. This here too is, I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish in this drawing, but that was such a phenomena when I looked at first time at the bright light. All of a sudden, this became a spinning wheel of color, almost psychedelic without drugs. Uh, it just was this everything else around the source of light became darker, and the spinning wheel, almost like one of those children's toys that you have that you push like that and it spins and gives sparks. That's exactly what was going on in my head. And I actually called the doctor and I was worried about it, because I said, what the heck is going on with my eye? Why do I have circles around everything that I look? Why every color that I see or every image I see becomes a circle? And he said, that's just you. I said, is it the lens or whatever? He said, no, it's just your eyes being stressed because of the surgery. So I kept working and trying to discover things from the past. If you notice the center on top of the right, that's going back to my technique where I actually do the work. I erase it with a eraser to create sort of a smudge and then build upon it. So I tried to see if that thing would work here. And as I kept working, the square grids wasn't talking to me. But I said, wait a minute, I used to like all those flowing river shapes, all the oxbows and so on. So what I did is I incorporated uneven rectangles onto it, created almost like a frame of very light color pencil, and then put the more intense colors in the middle. And if you look at the combination with it, it does have a sort of a flow around it, just like it had before. So no matter how many times you finish a project, no matter how many times you have done certain works, okay, every time something new happens. As an artist, you don't forget what you've done before, because really thinking about works I've done when I was a teenager or earlier in certain landscapes and so on, my basic strokes of pencil or movement of hand still remain the same after, say, 7 decades. But there's something there that every time something new happens, that pushes you, to more works. I remember something which is maybe not related to this exactly, but people were telling me many, many years ago when I finally started to, everybody was commiserating when I wasn't selling my work, but when I started to sell my work, everybody, not everybody, a lot of people started saying, well, how can you give away? How can you give away those creations of you? They're like your children. You just give it away to people and so on. And my answer to it was yes, because if you think I'm giving away my children this way because that way, you know how many things are from each one, how many images are being born in my brain that I want to keep doing it. And if I want to keep doing it, I have to get canvas, and I have to get, hey, that's a slip for Kansas, canvas, and I want to get the pencils. And no art store owner is an idiot that I can come up to him or her saying, hey, I'm handsome. I never get a cold. Can you give me some paints? I mean, that's not going to happen. They want cash. So therefore, every work that I sell provides me the freedom to open up new areas and so on that I can continue working. And so what happens is slowly when you're working with it, you start combining things and you start twisting them around. And I shifted the grids and to see what happens. It's not only that I had an idea what I'm going to do in this series, but the series itself suggested an idea where I'm going to go. So you notice that I use some of the background from the earliest drawings I showed you before, where those kind of flowing lines, but with a different pencil, and combine the newer discoveries. And sometimes I had, almost like having some opening up an egg and having twin yolks in it. See what happens to that interaction. And slowly I got to know what those pencils can do. So you notice that those pencils now, I am able to handle them and to get the color to become much more intense while still keeping the spinning and the fluctuating thing from my original perception after I had my cataracts removed. And as you see here again, I make 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I tried again the erasing part on one aspect and the new color. So almost like this is on the top is sort of the old way I was seeing it because things were out of focus. And now everything became brighter and became focused. This is actually, believe it or not, it's sort of inspired by the vision of Ezekiel of wheels within wheels and so on. And it was just an exercise for me to see if I can pull it off within this kind of a thing where I have a cross hatched of white that's going across, have diagonals going one way and the other, and plus having circles and the circles being breakout, and then in the middle having the big circle. So I tried to interact the colors with each other, and I am pretty happy with this. And then, of course, I went back, as I said, I used to have reds. I went to the blue. And that's, again, the intensity of the color. I'm able to handle the materials and changing the different textures, sometimes very meticulous and sometimes like on the upper, the center to the right that you see on the screen, just messing around, just moving my hands and seeing what the gesture does show you. This is the last drawing of this particular series. I was very happy with it because after the blue came the red. So, cool colors to red to warm colors and so on. And actually, I'm very happy with this kind of complementary green and reds. And also what I did is I stole a trick from Michelangelo. Michelangelo, when he did the Pietà and it was sitting in the Vatican right there as you enter it, he was standing and he was looking at people admiring the Pietà. And everybody, he was a very young man at that point. And everybody thought that this really famous other sculptor did it. They didn't know that Michelangelo was the person who created this sculpture. So he snuck in at night and carved on a strap that goes across the Virgin Mary's chest. He's got Michelangelo's Buonarroti facit est. Michelangelo Buonarroti did this. So it's like very strange. So what I did here, if you look at the upside down, you can finally see it. You see it says my name, Arie, here, right? And it says finished series, okay? And It tells you December 2003. Yeah. So I stuck in. And now we'll talk about this a little bit later. This is what the whole series looks like. All 18 pieces. It's a nice, almost like a chest amulet. The whole thing is just, to me, I have it still hanging on the wall in my studio at home. And every day I can look at it and try to get something else because I already am thinking of the next series I started working here. Now, what happens here is that I'm going to go through this because I always do how I work. I decide on a certain combination. I decide where the squares are going to be. I make them, center them and so on. I add, the circles to it. This time I use the compass. Most of the time I don't, but for this one I did use a compass to make sure that it works. And of course, to extend the line there on the bottom, for instance, I had to go outside of the image, put another piece of paper, and then figure out where the center point is in order so the compass can make the proper circle. And then, as I told you before, I start from the left-hand side, upper left hand going to the bottom right. Why? Because I'm a right-handed person. And were I to start on the other side and I'm drawing with that, I would probably smudge it. Although in those particular pencils, they're as permanent as encaustic because they're wax. I mean, it was really kind of amazing because I could put my hand on it and really it didn't smear. It was just like painting or drawing with a candle. And I think it's very permanent, actually. I remember seeing the paintings in Pompeii, on Paestum, or in Heraklion in Greece, all the encaustic lasting 5,000 years. So definitely this piece of paper, if nothing, nobody burns it, is going to last much longer than I will. And you see how it pushes itself through, and I keep adding. And all of those, each one of the decisions are not pre-planned. They just respond to what I've done before, and the piece of work is created. So this is what the whole suite looks like at this point. And it's a friend of mine said after my previous lecture saying, boy, you're still kicking, you're still doing work. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, in a few months, I'll be 80 years old. Just kind of an honor, I think. But I don't understand why the question is, or surprised that I'm still kicking. Well, thank God's whatever is that I can still do it. I can still think. And artist never really quits. We just constantly keep doing it until our fingers fall off, I guess. And every time you do a new series, and maybe that's what's keeping some people alive. Whether they're trying to finish a book or whether they're trying to finish write a composition or whatever, and that sort of has a life force. So not only that I'm giving my life force to the drawing, but the drawing is putting back life force back at me. So I want to thank you. And, as you can say, you can look at for my other works and so on the website.